Good evening, Dandies. Welcome to Undetermined, the podcast.
Okay, so I'll be Johnny and you're Jon.
Okay. All right, good, because I was never called Johnny. So
Okay, so you're Jon.
that'll work. I'm a Jon.
That's
Yep.
the voice that goes with Jon.
That's the voice that goes with
All
Jon.
right, let's hear.
And I am
This is
Matt.
Jon's voice.
Let's hear Matt's voice for a second.
I'm right here. I am Matt. I have always been Matt.
I turned on my Wi-Fi and I'm using these. I'm sitting up in my bed loft, and there's a fan because it's like 100 degrees here. Or well, shit. It was yesterday. Let's see. What is it? What is it here now? It's not. You know what? God, it's only 75 degrees outside.
Wow.
But I'm such a wuss.
That's a good day lately.
Yeah. Okay. So where are you guys?
We're in Missouri. I'm in Columbia, Missouri, which is pretty much right smack in the middle of the state.
Okay.
You know, Missouri Tigers play here, University of Missouri. It's like College Town, USA, right in the middle. And Matt is in Kansas City, which you probably know where that is.
Okay. Kansas City.
Also Missouri.
Kansas City, here I come.
Yeah.
Yes. That one.
I have performed that song a fair number of times in the last 10 years.
Really? Weddings or?
Well, no. I've got like these weird kind of parallel careers, and I guess any career in the arts requires, to have several irons in the fire, because it's rare that you're going to have one that really pays the bills,
right,
in any significant way. It's funny. I was just texting with my daughter about careers in the arts because she's a budding visual artist. She's 24. And
oh, right on.
It's funny. I keep telling her kind of the same thing my parents told me, which is maybe you should develop a parallel career,
right.
And in the case of my conversation with her, it's a little more nuanced than what went on between my parents and me, because they knew nothing about making a living in the arts other than the fact that it's fucking impossible.
Right. Or they perceived it as impossible.
Well, yeah. I mean, my mom used to say really nasty stuff about a career in music. She'd say, she said guitar players are a dime a dozen.
Right.
And she said that the music business is full of nothing but drugs, alcohol, and bad women.
Oh no.
And at the well, right. And at the age I was when she said all that,
right.
all that
didn't sound like a bad
deal.
That
all just sounded like, okay, I'm going there. I don't,
That's where it is.
Yeah.
I've been looking for that.
I don't know. Like the psychology wasn't really working in her favor. Well, because they talk about reverse psychology, and the conversation I've been having with my girlfriend lately is that it's just psychology. It's not reverse psychology.
Right, it's the same thing.
You just have to have your head screwed on straight about what you're actually doing when you're saying something to a person, and
right.
And as a parent, it's really, and it's just funny to find myself preaching like that to my daughter, like, don't do what I did,
Right. That's hard. I mean, I've done visual art my whole life, and it's just like, I was always told that, well, go out and look for something where you can get a paycheck, do that in your spare time.
Well, do you,
that's all well and good.
Do you do visual art for a living though?
No, I don't. Nope. I never got into it. And I think I was really swayed by that, just because it was the kind of Midwestern thing where when you come out of Northern Illinois in a cornfield, where you're born, your chances of really getting out there as like a painter, or
right. Maybe a house painter.
Right, maybe a house painter. Yeah, there you go. Just grab the bigger brushes, Jon. You can, make a living doing this.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There was very little encouragement there. It was scary.
But wait, so are you the one that's a musician? Or are you guys both musicians?
Well, I was a singer a long time ago, like in high school. I fiddle around with a guitar, somewhat. So, and we both really just like music,
right,
a lot. And Matt was a DJ.
I was a DJ for many years.
So were you guys aware of Psychefunkapus at the time?
I was. I think I kind of introduced.
You introduced me to Psychefunkapus. Yeah.
Oh, probably 10 years ago, something like that.
Oh, no, more than that.
Did either one of you guys see us when we came through?
No, I never got a chance to see you guys. I don't think anytime you came through, I would have gone had I known you were anywhere close to me.
Well, man,
my college years were in
Springfield,
in
Missouri,
Cape Girardeau, Missouri. So, you know, at that time, you didn't have internet to tell you everything that was happening everywhere.
Right.
Well, that's right.
So, if you guys
did you guys ever come through there? Or
well, you didn't have many chances. You know, I think we were in Missouri once.
Yeah, that would have probably done it for us.
And I know, I know we
Our
went.
shots would have been lower down that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we went to Kansas City at least once, but it was Kansas City. Yeah, it was. Let's see. Well, I don't think we ever played Kansas City, Kansas. We played Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah.
That's what works.
But we didn't.
Oh, where he is now, but
right
back then it would have been a 4-hour drive.
We didn't tour long. You know, we had a really short kind of. Oh God, how I don't even know how to describe it. So you guys found a Psychefunkapus record. Was it the first one or the second one?
For me, it was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I can kind of tell you how I came upon it. Was my freshman year of college, which would have been 89, 90 would have been that year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and back in those days, you just kind of had to come upon music to really find it. And I just got into college. I was in a college town, and I go to the music store, and I'm just asking the guy there, what's something different, man? Because I'm curious what else is out there that I haven't been exposed to in small town southern Missouri, where I'm from.
Yeah.
And he's like, you should check these guys out.
Well, I guess I have him to thank for this phone interview then.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing too is that when he introduced you guys to me, we were both fans of just Bay Area metal and funk music at that time.
Does that mean Primus or Faith No More or both?
I was a big Mr. Bunglehead. Still, I'm a big Mr. Bunglehead.
Well, our trajectory in relation to Primus and Mr. Bungle was actually really funny, and there's a couple funny stories about that. I
want to hear them.
I don't know any of those guys very well, but I know a little bit about what the guitarist has been doing since then with Secret Chiefs. And I have a friend that played in that band, played in Secret Chiefs 3, and that is some serious stuff.
Yeah.
That is some really cool stuff. I mean, you know, the whole scene, I mean, like kind of splintered out into a whole bunch of different stuff. And I felt like, you know, this is an interesting conversation when you're talking about how you discovered music before the internet, right? And 1989, 1990 is definitely before the internet. And I mean, you could say 95 is really the year that the internet kind of began.
Kind of.
Right. But it was still a lot more archaic at that time.
Yep.
It was. And you know, I don't know how much you guys really want to know, but my life went through some crazy ups and downs and changes. And, you know, I hadn't ever lived apart from my mom's house until the band had a record deal.
Wow.
You know, so that's kind of a weird trajectory. Like normally you might go out and kind of live in an apartment with some roommates and learn how to like make freaking eggs and shit, you know?
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
But like things happen in a really bizarre order for me, kind of. And I realized that we're skipping around, but I ended up having a kiddo in 1995, you know, who totally changed my life and who's like my best friend now. And, you know, we're buds and we're, you know, father-daughter. And she's, like I was saying before, she's a visual artist. And, you know, I've done my best to teach her music, but I didn't try too hard because, you know, I want it to be fun for her if she does it.
Right.
Anyway, so back to your guys' questions.
No, that's okay. I got kind of caught in that too because I had a kid, my first kid in like 1996. Yeah, or 97. Sorry, got married in 96, and then in 97. She's also a visual artist.
Oh, sweet. And our kids have never lived in a world without the internet. My daughter points that out to me on a regular basis.
Yeah, I got to thinking about her when you're telling that. Yeah.
So you went to the college. Well, okay. So you were listening to college radio and going to college, right?
Right.
And we were in this period of time at that time where there was kind of this new force of college radio. Now, I'm sure that there's always been college radio, but from my understanding, there was this whole notion of alternative music.
Right.
And then there was the fact that major record labels were trying to get in on part of the action.
Yeah.
Because there had been a lot of indie labels and kind of like grassroots stuff that was connected to college radio and the way that people were marketing themselves. And it almost wasn't marketing, like it was, there was a DIY kind of plucky, vibe to that, to punk rock and to a lot of the alternative music styles, and everything seemed really honest, and then what happened was the labels were like, well, shit, half the audience doesn't give a crap about our corporate shit that we're trying to sell everyone. They're not trying to listen to whatever new version we've got of Journey or Loverboy or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like they're busting out all their carbon copies of tried and true formulas that worked before, and it's not working for them.
Right.
So they started forming their own indie labels and doing their own style of marketing through college radio, and that's kind of what happened with us. Is that like there was this brand new department at Atlantic where it was still a big label, but they were trying to market to college radio. And they were doing that with us, even though they were really like unsure what to do with a band like ours because they didn't have much experience with it. They went, oh, there's white guys and black guys in the band. What kind of I mean
I know, yeah.
It blew my mind that was literally like so confusing for them.
Can you guys do a cover of Ebony and Ivory? That would be so good.
That McCartney.
Well, yeah, and the whole racial element was an issue, and of course over the years I've had to like, how much of that did I make it an issue, or I ended up forming these lifelong friendships with these two guys, that have just like straight up made me a better person. Like,
that's awesome.
That's great.
I would know, and that's just because my mom basically conditioned me to do that. I mean, my parents met at UC Berkeley, and my mom was a liberal, and her whole idea was, well, the world is fucked up, and you're gonna go out and you're gonna make it a better place.
Right. No pressure.
And that's a little much to lay on your kid.
Exactly.
But she basically adopted Paul, the drummer. The two of them had this incredible, like this absolutely adorable relationship.
Oh, that sounds like Matt's mom and me.
Paul.
No, it's similar sometimes. Yeah. No. Yeah.
So back to this. So back to the beginning. Back to the local record store. So you went to a record store, and this guy said, check this out.
Yeah, and I've wondered since if it was like maybe he had some Bay Area connections, because the other band that he tried to turn me on to was Mordred.
Yeah.
And I know that they were kind of contemporaries of yours.
Yeah, those guys are all my friends.
Yeah.
And they just put a new record out actually a little while ago.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
They're back in existence, I guess, and they made a
That's
record.
Cool.
That's great.
Yeah, they made a record recently. Mordred was interesting because they were kind of like they were the metal end of things, and we were all into metal. And the thing I missed the most, and there are still aspects of this,
Right.
But like the thing I missed the most is that at that time, no one gave a shit about style of music.
Right.
It wasn't cliquey. The scene was a scene, and it had some of the problems that any scene will have. But what was cool about it is that you'd be just as likely to go out and hear like a traditional reggae band or a dub band, or a ska band, and then you'd go out and see a metal band, and all the musicians knew each other. It didn't matter what the style of music was. In fact, people that were in kind of our side of things, if you wanted to call it thrash funk, once again, the media comes up with these names for things. Yeah. It's never the musicians. Like, no one ever called himself a hippie until the New York Times decided that was a word, So it's like we were hippies and we were into ska and reggae and funk and all these styles of music that we, knew varying degrees about. We weren't experts on all the styles of music that we played, but everyone in that time in our little circle was trying to try their hand at all these different styles, and we were kind of one of the hodgepodge bands. There were a bunch of other ones like us. Primus, I think Primus survived that time because they had their own sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And because Les had a shtick. People love shtick in showbiz, right? I mean, the reason that he's still going is because it was so easy to imitate and mock him back then, defying the laws of tradition, In fact, he spoke to me that way when I was trying to get us our first real gig.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah, I went to Berkeley Square, which was one of the coolest small clubs at the time.
We liked a lot of bands that came out of there. A lot of them, yeah.
Well, right. I went to see Primus open for Faith No More there.
Oh, man, that would have been...
Right, and the thing was, like, Faith No More was already blowing up. I mean, they started blowing up when they still had Chuck singing.
Right.
But Chuck didn't speak, rich guy music business ease. Right. Chuck was a punk rocker.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, he was. True. Yeah.
And I loved it. Yeah. I loved Chuck and I loved their whole vibe and everything. But like, it's so funny what happens when you see like these kind of prideful, rebellious, young, musicians, like all of a sudden they're hanging out around a pool at a party with a bunch of rich record executives. It just, things get out of hand.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Silverman was talking about that club and just really how it's, had all these legendary acts, but you're just like, this is a really small place. Do you know him?
Oh, you're talking about that one guy.
Yeah. From the Fabulous Hedgehogs and
totally.
Yeah.
Did you hear the Hedgehogs?
Yeah, I've heard the Hedgehogs. We've had him on our show. Yeah. We've had him on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
He's a great guy.
They blew my mind.
Great guy. Man. Super talented. Man, it's amazing.
He's hilarious.
Yeah, and he's funny. Yeah, we watch Radio 1 guy all the time on Monday. So
I've been checking that out from time to time too. It's really cool to see kind of his take on how to interface with the public now.
Yeah, he's just kind of fearless with it, really.
Yeah. Well, and he's creative.
Right.
Like I like the video effects and the fact that he's interacting with it, and it's kind of a combination of prepared and improvised,
and using that magic pipe as like a joystick and like controls for all that green screen shit. It's really cool.
Well, no, it makes me wonder when I see him doing that. It makes me wonder how many people that are into that persona know that the guy is a freaking like killer vocalist, like a real singer, and that he's an upright bass virtuoso.
Yeah. Well, we tried to do our part to get that.
Oh, you mean you got the Hedgehog?
Well, no, we got Mike. We just had Mike on for the conversation.
Mike,
as Mike, telling stories about like recording with Tom Waits and his up and coming time there too in the Bay Area.
I didn't know that they recorded with Tom Waits. Was that the Hedgehogs?
No, it was just Mike.
Yeah.
It's a great story. If you check out the podcast,
there's a story in the podcast called "The Ballad of Mikey Two Dicks," and that's the infamous Tom Waits recording session with Mike, that one guy Silverman. Yeah. So.
Well, I never did a recording session with Tom, but I have had two. I have two meeting Tom Waits stories.
Let's hear at least one of them.
One of them is from Prairie Sun Studios in Katati, and Tom's an interesting guy, and I got off of alcohol 5.5 years ago. And it wasn't an easy thing to do. Now, stopping drinking alcohol in and of itself isn't hard. The thing that's hard, I mean, maybe it's hard for people that start shaking if they don't drink a shot of fucking vodka in the morning, but I wasn't one of those people. It's like the cultural, mental stuff and the insecurity and the comfort level with interacting with other people and all that kind of shit. That's the stuff that really makes alcohol like a big problem for our society,
Right. The lubricant. Yeah.
Right. So Tom during my second story, I mean, the first one's really quick. I was just standing there in Prairie Sun Studios, wearing long john bottoms only, and I'm warming up on guitar. Like we had made the first record and we were gearing up to make the second record. And we still were a 5-piece. I don't know if you guys noticed that we were a 5-piece on the first record and a 4-piece on the second record.
Right.
I can't remember whether he's on those recordings or not. I don't think he is, actually. So we were up at Prairie Sun Studios.
You had two singers, right?
Yeah, and that was a big part of what made the band unique, I thought. It was a power trio with two lead singers, and Gene played some keyboards and a little acoustic guitar, and Manny played percussion.
Right.
It's like anytime Manny would pick up anything that you could hit with a stick, the whole groove would just like be improved. He's just one of those incredibly musical people from an incredibly musical background and place. You know, like the whole Puerto Rican salsa element is just really heavy. And God, I learned so much about the world just from hanging out with Manny and some of the people I knew after that played music, you know, people from Brazil and whatnot. But anyway, so I'm standing there kind of warming up on guitar in Prairie Sun Studios because we'd stayed up there. They've got a really nice accommodation. You know, you wake up to the sound of roosters in the morning and
oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. You're basically on a farm, you know. And so I go in this nice recording room. I was really lucky, you know. The label was paying for us to demo out songs for the second record, and I was playing this blue guitar that's sitting in front of me right now. It's in the process of being restrung for gigs I have tomorrow. You know.
What kind of guitar?
I think I mentioned to you guys a minute ago that I keep going off on tangents. Forgive me.
No, it's fine. No,
my friends are so tired of it. Like it's like my what I'm trying to do this year is learn how to stay on topic. You know? After 50 years of exploring every possible tangent, you know. But no, I had these two guitars built because I still lived with my mom when we got signed with Atlantic. So we each got $5,000. You know, because record deals still did that at the time. I don't know what the fuck they do now, or if there is such a thing as a record deal
as an advance or anything. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that larger entities take on artists and give them advances, but it's a different kind of system. You know, at that point it was like, you had the label, you had the publisher, you had the booking agent, and you had the manager. You know, now you've got companies that are trying to do all of those things, and you've got all these different vertical freaking marketing, internet.
Yeah, and it certainly is weird. It's like one of the things that I was thinking about. I was going back and watching a lot of like Psychefunkapus videos, and it's like you guys also had to make short films, like with MTV and the popularity of that is just sort of it's not a good or bad thing necessarily. I loved music videos. We grew up and digested those things, but it's like, how weird is it that you guys also had to make these like mini movies as well as what you're doing with music?
Well, yeah, and making a video at that point was a much different kind of deal, right? Because having a camera that would record at broadcast quality, wasn't really that common. And now you've got iPhones shooting 4K, and you can...
Yeah, you could do it at home.
Yeah, you can. You can do a lot, but it's funny how still there's a, you can tell when someone's using a pro camera.
Right.
Because there's always going to be higher end stuff, like there's the consumer and then there's kind of the prosumer level. And, So my doppelganger called me. We're starting yet another subject. Fuck. My dear friend, Billy Atwell. Okay. So I'm Jonnie Axtell, right?
Right.
And I've got this friend named Billy Atwell, who's probably going to be really mad that I mentioned his name because he doesn't really want to be in the public eye in any way, shape, or form at this point. He's become a visual artist, and he makes the most incredible visual art, but he's still doing music, and we both kind of do this thing where we create the music, like with a computer. It's easy, everyone does it now, but back then it was a big deal if you could like do everything, to compose and record everything somehow, whether you used MIDI or whatever. Anyway, Billy called me and I told him I was doing an interview, and he just immediately went, "Oh God, the last few interviews I did, the stuff that made it to print was all wrong." He said I mentioned Fugazi and Bill Laswell, and they got both of those things wrong. No, anyway,
we don't do that. We don't do any gotchas or anything like that. And actually, we kind of cringe at the term interview. We don't like that at all. We like to just hang out with people that, we really like and respect and want to talk to. And, it's just, I don't know. We're not really media.
Well, I had kind of a rude awakening when it comes to the nature of journalism and sensationalism in the media, because when the Puss, we called ourselves the Puss, or people called us the Puss.
I like it. I like it a lot.
And of course, there's a big pronunciation problem there because the end of the word is P-U-S, and P-U-S is not pronounced puss.
Right.
We had this, we had this thing happen where we had the label kind of trying to get at us.
Right.
And I think it's because we were kind of a little more poppy than the average kind of San Francisco Bay Area thrash funk band. You know, like we had vocal harmonies and some songs that were kind of
you
like
could dance to your shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though it was, you know,
you shake your ass to it.
There were songs that did a tempo change in the middle or went from like punk rock to funk or whatever. I mean, so there was some weird shit, but then there were also tunes that kind of you could groove out to, and you didn't have to mosh, or you know you could dance. And then there were all these vocals, which Primus didn't have that, and they were kind of a little more alternative, whereas we had these lush harmonies going on and stuff like that, which I think made the label kind of a little more interested. Like what the Atlantic came to see the Limbo Maniacs at the Fillmore,
right?
And it was a show. The Untouchables were the headliner. The Limbo Maniacs were the support act, and we were the opener, the very beginning opener. Right. And we played at like 8:00 or something, and it was our first and only Fillmore show. And I remember it being so weird for me because I'm looking out in the audience and there's all these teenagers out there. Uh-huh. So there were people in the audience that were closer to my age. You know how when you're that age, like a couple years difference really matters, whereas it doesn't now.
Yeah.
So when we started playing in bars, I was 17, and there weren't very many people who were calling me on it and trying to kick me out of the bar, So when I was about 17, 18 is when I started being able to get into all the clubs in San Francisco because I was in a band that was playing there. We weren't headlining yet, but we were playing in all the clubs. And so like I told you, I went to see Primus open up for Faith No More at the Berkeley Square. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure it was Faith No More. It might have been Fishbone, actually. Okay. How you kind of combine memories that happened in the same place. So it's like, there was definitely a night where I walked up to Les at the Berkeley Square. Now to be clear, any Fishbone show that happened back then was blowing my mind. Yeah. And I still think that they are probably the greatest band to come out of California in the last 40 years. Like, I mean,
they are fun.
A lot of people might argue with me, but I think that they're a better band than the fucking Eagles.
Oh, all right.
I mean, if you want to put it like that.
Oh man, yeah.
That Fishbone is not only culturally significant, but like they've written some incredible songs and have some of the most incredible musicians that have been through that band. Or now they're back to now they're back to a 6-piece, and they're all original except for one guy. So if I was seeing Fishbone at the Berkeley Square, I would have stayed. Whereas Faith No More, I wasn't big on. Like when they started their set, I watched a couple songs and I went, "Oh, this is a cartoon," and I just walked out. Like it just really, like the guitar player who I know now, and he's a cool guy. It's like all those people are really cool. Everyone that I've met from that band was great. Including Mike. Although me and Mike had kind of a star-crossed thing happen because I was such a clueless kid,
he's a big hero.
But so anyway, I walked up to Les and I said, "Hey man, I'm in a band called Psychefunkapus, and we'd love to open for you guys somewhere in San Francisco." And he goes, "Psychefunkapus? Oh, David Lefkowitz," and so he answered me in character, and then he kind of turned his head and walked off. So I didn't actually have like a human being interaction with him. It was more like I was a fan, And so the next day, totally, it was such a cartoon. It was such a caricature. So the next day I looked up David Lefkowitz in the San Francisco phone book. And, he's doing great now. He's with AEG. I mean, he's managed all these bands that actually made it. And he's done all sorts of stuff over the years and has been very successful, But so at the time, he was just booking Primus. So I called him and we talked, and I told him that Les had asked me to call him, and he gave us an opening slot for Primus at the Night Break on a Friday night. And that was what kind of began our, pretty quick rise through the clubs, it only took a couple years in the clubs in the Bay Area before we were really close to headlining. And then when we got the record deal, we started kind of becoming a headliner in bigger places. And blah, 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 blah.
Right. We saw, Mike on Radio 1 guy, as we were talking about earlier, he was showing a whole bunch of like old flyers from Berkeley Square.
Yeah.
The other day, remember that, Matt?
Yeah. And your name, Psychefunkapus,
you guys popped up.
Constant.
Right. And that was a thing that finally, I think we were both watching that episode, and Matt was like, I think we got to get Psychefunkapus. We got somebody from Psychefunkapus on there. He's like, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Jonnie Axtell.
And it's something we've kind of talked about.
Yeah, a lot of, it was crazy. Fungamungo and,
love those guys.
A lot of great bands played out of there.
I mean, I literally like every member of that band, Fungamungo, they're my dear friend. If they were here, I would like kiss them on the cheek.
Oh, that's nice.
I
nice.
Absolutely love those guys. And you know, we've all gone our different directions, you know, like not all of us in Psychefunkapus are still really playing music,
right?
But some of us are, you know, and everyone's doing well. Everyone's pretty much healthy and happy. You know, in Fungamungo, you got guys all over the place. But, you know, you mentioned Mordred a minute ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, recently I was in a band called Phantom Power. I did that for about 3 years. It was a band I formed here with Josh Z from the Protein and the Mother Truckers, and Joaquin Spengeman, who is the drummer for the Blue Chunks.
Oh, yeah, Blue Chunks.
Hellworms. And then Amir was the bass player in Sourpuss. Although our original bass player was Angeline Saras, who's still kind of a rising star of the Bay Area music scene. She's played with Narada Michael Walden and Ernest Ranglin and a bunch of people. She's a real powerhouse of a bass player and a person.
Check her out. Yeah.
Yeah, she's really done well. She's working her butt off just to get herself out there and promote herself in a way that I just kind of don't have the patience for. You know, I mean, If I were smarter, I would be taking photos and fucking going for a run and losing weight, make myself look good, and try and play with as many people as possible and really get myself out there. But I played in cover band.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like Notorious, man, it's great. I've been watching a lot of your videos.
Oh, cool! Did you see any of the stuff where we're backing up celebrities?
Yeah. You guys just played with Mark McGrath, Tone Loc.
That was a year ago, and I just shared that because it was actually.
I just thought.
I think that was the last.
Yeah, you played with John Kay. I wanted to ask you about that.
That was so great, man.
Yeah, I bet. Man.
You know, and I'll tell you, I've met a whole lot of celebrities, and I have kind of a policy with people that are celebrities, just because of the fact that I had like I had a little tiny brush with fame.
Right.
I would never say that I became a celebrity, but I learned what it was like.
You got a taste. Yeah, I get it.
Well, I got to see what it's like to be a person that everyone wants to talk to, and I realized that you don't always want to talk to people.
Right.
Like, you're not always in a mood to be like, yeah, well, this is my new album, and here, can I sign this for you? I mean, like, and what's weird is that the people that want to talk to celebrities have this idea in their head of how the celebrity's supposed to act and behave and what they're supposed to say.
And make it go their way. Yeah.
Well, right. And if you fulfill that, then they're happy. But if you don't, oh man, like, you're fucked, because, you know, there's going to be this whole, I don't even know if it has to be sunshine and rainbows all the time, because, I mean, one of the first things we were told when we got the record deal by this genius that signed us, I mean, like, he wasn't a genius because he signed us, but this guy, John Carter, is the guy that signed us to Atlantic. And John Carter wrote Incense and Peppermints for the Strawberry Alarm Clock. You know,
really?
He was a songwriter, a producer, a manager. I mean, he was a jack of all trades in the music biz. And he died back, I think, in 2004 or something. And one of my biggest regrets in my life is that I didn't go after Carter and learn to, like, and become his friend. And I was so turned off by the music biz when I saw the absolute horror that it actually is. You know, and I was so young and impressionable. It, like, actually really scarred me. Like, it fucked me up. I didn't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys ask me a question and I'll try and answer it?
Because this is fascinating shit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Absolutely. Because one thing that I think about is just how the shape of the music industry, the music that we're exposed to, we have all these great memories of great bands, and great recordings and things that shape and mold our lives. But the thing that's kind of the dark underbelly of that is how much of that is shaped by production, is shaped by money, and how much shit have we not been exposed to that could have just blown our fucking minds, and we never get that opportunity, because of that kind of the biz,
Well, right. For every celebrity that everyone loves the music of, there's another 10 or 20 or 100 people that are easily that brilliant
or better.
Everyone says, "Oh no, if they were that brilliant, they would have made it." And it's
bullshit.
No, actually, they didn't. Yeah, they didn't necessarily want to go through that, or things didn't line up for them.
Right? You don't get the right break.
I mean, the accidental nature of it.
Well, I'll use an example. We're in the Midwest, right? And we get exposed to, like, John and I have seen some bands that just fucking were incredible.
Oh yeah.
That were around us. But guess what? We're in No Town, USA, and people don't notice us a lot of the time.
Well, it's funny. I decided I wasn't going to talk about this new project I'm working on because it's not really officially anything yet. But one of the guys that I'm starting to work with had a band where there was a song called "California Will Fall into the Sea," and he came from the Midwest. And one of the funniest things I think about that song is that there's a point in it where he's just got too much to say to actually sing it, so he just goes into spoken word. And the previous version that he did with the old band. And one of the things that he says is that, to he and the people that he grew up around, California always had this kind of mythical reputation as some kind of paradise. So there's that, and then there's also the fact that you think, oh, you're so much closer to like the engine of the entertainment industry out here, when really it lives in New York and LA now because of the fact that, and it has for many years, because of the fact that the way the music business works. And the last time that the Bay Area was really like spitting out art, well, shit. I guess I can't say that because you got people like Train who are definitely from here who I can't stand. Sorry. I do know one guy in that band who's just totally amazing. He's like a really cool dude. I've only met him a couple times and I really liked him. So I guess I shouldn't be talking.
I like one of their songs.
We can edit.
I like one of their songs, but I will never admit which one it is.
But once again, we touched on a million things. I have my stories I always tell, like my Tom Morello story and my what specifically is most interesting to you about all this?
It's all interesting to me. And I did want to ask you about one or two things though. I saw in discography and just kind of looking at your credits and stuff, did you write a song for Idiot Flesh? Is that true?
I did.
You did. So what are your connections to those guys and Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum? Because I'm a big...
Okay, so you know about them because of Sleepy Time, right?
I do. I went and backtracked.
Okay, so you became aware of Sleepy Time and then you looked into kind of their past and saw Idiot Flesh.
Yeah.
Are you aware of Free Salamander Exhibit?
A little.
That's the new band.
Okay.
And it proves how old I am that I still call them the new band.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no, I hear where you're coming from, yeah.
Well, as you get older, time just goes faster.
Right.
So so like Free Salamander Exhibit has been together for a few years.
Okay.
And it was one of those things I looked at and I kind of went, man, I should have been in that band, but because I've idolized those guys. I mean, it's really funny, everyone's got their own perspective, right?
Yeah.
And the whole time I was doing Psychefunkapus, I was looking over at Idiot Flesh and I was going, no, that's real music.
Yeah.
And I have a dear friend who was in Idiot Flesh named Eugene John, and I know all the other guys in all that stuff, pretty in varying degrees. Like I know the guys that were in Sleepy Time pretty well, and I'm involved in a thing called ICS, which is the Immersion Composition Society.
Okay.
I joined that in 2003 with a couple of the guys from Sleepy Time.
Okay.
Dan Rathbone, the bassist, and Michael Melander, who is a multi-instrumentalist and songwriter and a total genius. And Dan's a genius too. And don't even get me started about Nils. I mean, Nils is just like so incredible.
Yeah, I invited Nils. I kind of thought it was a long shot.
Well, you never know. I mean, I don't.
You never know.
Yeah, I mean, I can encourage people to be on your thing, but like, I only know these guys in, like I said, varying degrees. But I was very close to Gene in 92, 93, 94, 95. And we were roommates.
At your mom's house?
Oh, Well, let's see. Here's the funny part is that it was in apartment number 3. Mm-hmm. So the band got signed and I made the record here in the city because I'm in San Francisco now. Okay. I grew up over in Marin County and everybody from Psychefunkapus was pretty much in Marin at the time. In different parts of Marin, and I could go into Marin and Tupac. And, we spent time with him before he became the icon.
No, I want some of those stories too.
Yeah, that's a good story. I mean, I got a lot of good stories from all this. And the funny thing is, I helped out a lot of people's careers. The person whose career I helped out the least with all my efforts back then was myself. There are people now that have stuff going on that wouldn't be happening if I hadn't introduced so-and-so to so-and-so and all this shit, I mean, and it just cracks me up sometimes. I'm watching my friend Darby sing in Golden Gate Park, and she's up there because she's such a dear friend of mine, and she sings so incredibly well. And I introduced her to Paul Kantner in 1990, and then she ended up singing with him on and off until he died, And the only reason I knew Paul Kantner is because our singer was dating their daughter, Grace and Paul's daughter. When we made the first record, our singer Gene, his girlfriend was China, and I knew China through Redwood Drama. Wasn't even the high school I went to, but I knew her because we were in a play together. And then she ended up becoming this MTV VJ and
wow. Crazy.
We had a subject that we were on though. Let's stick with it.
Tom Waits.
Oh God, pick one.
I didn't. I kept telling you, tell your favorite one. Go ahead.
The Tom one was funny because I had just totally geeked out on Rain Dogs. Like Rain Dogs was so good. And, that was really all I was hip to at that point. And so it's 1991, I guess, and I'm sitting in this studio. I'm standing there, half naked, and here comes this guy with a pork pie hat, through the door, and behind him is our engineer Muka, who's now one of the owners of that place. Mm-hmm. Here it was Tom Waits walking into Prairie Sun Studios for the first time. He ended up making 4 records there, I believe. He did Bone Machine, and then he did Alice and Blood Money, which came out at the same time. And then there was another one. Anyway, so it was Tom coming to Prairie Sun Studios to check the place out for the very first time. And I was standing there playing my blue
guitar.
It's kind of a tacky 1980s heavy metal guitar,
Right.
And I still play them in the cover band because they're the best guitars I own. But like I said, we got $5,000, and I still live with my mom, and so I didn't have to pay the rent or pay off my car. I drove a piece of shit $200 Falcon at that, and somehow miraculously that kept running. Or no, I think I was onto the Dart that I got for like $400. Yeah, it was a '74 Dart, and you could only get in one side of it because one side of it was completely caved in from an accident. And so I still live with my mom. I spent $4,000 on the guitars. I had 2 guitars custom built, and I still got them here.
Tom Waits.
But anyway, Tom walked in, and I shook his hand, and I was a little starstruck because I had been listening to Rain Dogs, and he spoke in the character voice, which I found interesting. Well, yeah, he was like, "Oh boy,
nice to meet you."
And I was like, "Well, hey, Mr. Waits, I'm a fan of I'm a big fan of your work." Oh, well, no.
Right.
And then they went on and started looking around at Muka's showing him the Neve board or whatever it was they had in there. And then the second time I met him, it was after I had done a 6-month run with Hedwig and the Angry Ants.
Oh, yeah, I want to talk about that sometime,
Matt's
too.
You turned me on to it, too.
I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
But I had just been really kind of chewed up and spat out by the music business for like the third time. Because I'd gone out on this tour with Eric Martin. Eric Martin was a well-known singer around here in the Bay Area. He had a band called 415, and then he changed it to Eric Martin Band, and he had a hit on the radio when I was in my early teens called Sucker for a Pretty Face. And then he got involved in this super group called Mr. Big.
Mr. Big.
Yeah.
I met him.
Yeah, Eric's cool. We had an interesting time together. We didn't always see eye to eye, but I'd love to hang out with Eric now, just after everything I've learned. It's been a really hard, long road for me. And sometimes it's taken me a little longer to learn certain lessons about the music business than it might have taken an ordinary person. But I think I just kind of dragged myself into it kicking and screaming, if that makes any sense. Like I had a dream and it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, and I was pretty inflexible.
Right. Well, that's rock and roll.
Well, yeah, but I mean, don't get me started on rebellion, though. If you want to learn about the nature of rebellion in rock and roll and how well it like actually reflects that, watch. There's a Jerry Casale interview that's in 7 parts. It's really long. You guys know who Jerry Casale is?
I do not.
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with him.
Jerry Casale is who you might call the number 2 guy in Devo.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So like everyone knows who Mark Mothersbaugh is because he became pretty well known as like the face of Devo and quirky guy with the glasses, and then he went on and he did a bunch of movie soundtrack work. Shows. But yeah, Jerry was the other singer-songwriter in that band, and he's a bass player. And there's an interview that he did in, as far as like podcasts and musician interviews and everything, I would highly recommend. It's a little long.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell what questions are being answered because it was never edited together and finished. It's just like this raw
Sounds like our episode sometimes.
Well, until we get them finished, yeah.
But he's a genius, though. Like, I learned so much because Devo is one of my favorite bands since I was like 8 years old. And Jerry talks in there about rock and roll and rebellion in a way that it blew my mind. I had to play this part over and over again because it's a thought that I had, but I'd never really quite into a finished form, meaning like, well, if I grow my hair long and I go to a Leonard Skinner concert and I wear a band t-shirt and I'm smoking and drinking, am I really rebelling?
Yeah.
Or am I just playing out a series of instructions?
It's not like they didn't make a million of those Leonard Skinner shirts, so it's not like.
Well, and another thing is my dear friend Peter is a keyboardist in Leonard Skinner now, and he was in Psychefunkapus. I have him partially to thank for me finally figuring out that alcohol was bullshit. Because usually when your friends are having some amazing thing happen for them, you're the one trying to call and get some of their time and ride on their coattails, right? But during that period of time, I was so lucky, the guy, he just keeps calling me. And it's like for 2 weeks, he's calling me every other day. And I'm going, Pete, like, dude, you're the one that's in callbacks right now for Leonard Skinner. Like, you're going to get the gig. I know you're going to get the gig because you're such an amazing keyboardist. Why do you keep calling and bothering me? It's supposed to be the other way around. And he said, Johnny, because you need to go to a meeting. Alcohol was holding me back, and it's holding you back, and I'm no more talented than you are, and great things will happen for you if you get your shit together and get sober.
Wow. Yeah, that is a good friend.
Yeah, I love him, man. I got to see him recently. Yeah, and I love the idea of doing this again, too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, I got a bunch more questions.
War stories, I want to hear more about
funny stories on the road.
But wait, you asked me, you said you looked back through a discography and
I asked you about the Idiot Flash track.
Oh, okay. Let me tell you that story. Idiot Flesh was so amazing, man. They turned into a bigger thing before they split up and ended up getting to the point where they were pretty much carrying a freaking circus around with them.
Yeah.
So nobody was making any money.
Yeah.
I love it when I hear people say, "Oh, you must be making money off that local band."
Yeah. We got to pay 10 guys. We all spend our money on costumes and.
Oh my God! With them, by the time Idiot Flesh finally ended, they were to the point where they had like 25 people.
Yeah.
Oh,
a circus. It was performance art in a lot of ways too.
If you just search for Idiot Flesh inflatables, you'll see the most incredible thing where they had this instrumental that they wrote that kind of worked in the sound of the vacuum cleaner. And you're going like, what are you talking about? Okay, so they rewired vacuum cleaners so that they blow air.
Right.
And then they had these things that they built that were attached to them that then filled up with air so that so-and-so had horns and so-and-so had wings. And I mean, it was just out of control.
Realize it's going to make noise and just incorporate it into the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
They did.
So I had this really cool unit that I really wish I hadn't sold called a Digitech IPS 33B. And someday I'll get another one because I still think it's a great unit. Basically, like, in the 80s, somewhere in the middle to late 80s, Eventide, electronics company Eventide, which was really top shelf stuff, they came up with something called diatonic harmonization. Harmonizers before that were able to, do an octave below or an octave above, but it was always a static harmony, meaning the distance from whatever note you played to that note that it would then create using digital sampling tricks. That was always a consistent consistent interval. And then Eventide came up with this thing that it still would get really confused if you put like a chord into it. There was a setting for that, and I kind of came up with this angelic sound that made my guitar sound like keyboards at the time, and that was like so groundbreaking. But so anyway, I had this unit, and that was the unit that I was fucking around with when Tom Morello freaked out and ran out of the dressing room and was like, "What is that?" And I showed him how to do the bending thing, which of course turned out to be the solo in their first hit. Yeah, it just cracked me up because they started making this thing called a whammy pedal after that did that, which cracked me up because I was doing it with I programmed my unit to do that, And it's like this whole like idea of being ahead of your time is so funny because it's no good to be ahead of your time. Like if you come up with great shit, all that's going to happen is someone's going to come along and borrow it or appropriate it or whatever, and then they're going to go and use it on their hit when you're like, trying to get a job as a file clerk, and that's what happened to me. The same thing happened with our music. Right. Look at Limp Bizkit. As soon as the record labels had a band that was all white, that did the same kind of shit that we did, then they were all good to market. They were like, "Oh, we can market this," but they're so retarded. Capitalism is so fucking retarded. No, sorry, that's an offensive word, but like they were like, "Oh, we don't know how to market you guys because there's a rap in the middle of this rock song." And there's black guys and white guys in the band, so we don't know if we're supposed to market you to soul radio or to rock radio. And they're saying all this stuff to us, and we're looking back at them and we're saying, you realize that like 8 things you just said were racist.
Just because there's a little fuzz on the guitar, but they never have a problem with that with booking Prince on whatever or...
Right. Well, no, he confused the shit out of everybody too. They couldn't figure him out.
Yeah.
But he came at us with the notion that, look, I'm mixed and I know both. And that's a powerful notion, that's the notion that brought us Barack Obama and Dave Chappelle and a lot of people that are, well, and it's educated a lot of people, but I still think, oh my God, we still have
we've fallen backwards a little bit lately.
So falling backwards to back to Idiot Flesh. So I'm using this unit at home, and I had this synchronized tremolo thing going on, whoop, 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 and I'm doing an arpeggiated guitar part in time with that square wave vibrato, as Dan Rathbun calls it.
You're going along with the wah wah wah.
Yeah. So I'm going boom, 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 and I'm playing this pattern in time with that. Let me grab a guitar real quick. That's probably out of tune. But so I'm going like this. I'm going. So I'm doing that, but it's in time with whoa, 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 And so I came up with that main part, and then I came up with a B part where it goes to the 4 chord, and then I came up with a bridge where it does some kind of Beatlesque, tritone substitution 7 chord shit, where, the Beatles were really clever in that way. So I'm throwing a bunch of that stuff in, and I came up with this thing that was roughly 3 minutes long. We were roommates at the time, and Gene was at the store. Gene's a Korean-American guy, first generation, and the store that we went to at that time was run by Koreans, and so it was funny because, like, he would go over there and get stuff, and he'd pick up things for me if it was his turn to go, and then it was my turn to go to the store, and I'd be like, oh, how do you say thank you in Korean again, and so it was his turn to go to the store, and while he was gone at the store for, 8 or 9 minutes, I threw this thing down on the 4-track cassette machine. And then he came back and he heard it and he liked it and he said, can I do a vocal on this? And I said, yeah. And so he sat there with headphones on at my 4-track, stopping and starting it like so roughly. And suddenly I was just like, I kept hearing it in the other room, like my 4-track's going to break, because he's just shuttling around in the tape, and he spent hours, getting the words written and the vocal melodies and the tracks right on the 4-track. And then he brought it to Idiot Flesh and they ended up doing the song.
It's a great song.
Now, Nils never ended up doing the square wave vibrato thing, probably because it was really difficult to do that kind of thing at that time. And it still is. If you're going to do that kind of thing live with the band, it's usually smart to have the drummer play to a click.
Yeah.
That gets into a whole set of...
It's still a hauntingly good song. It's a really haunting song. really like Drown.
Well, it ended up being a really desperate song about a couple that were heroin addicts, which cracked me up because that was like one of the only drugs we weren't doing.
Probably for the best.
Of course, every heroin addict hears a song and says, that's about heroin.
Oh no, there was time for that later, Yeah. I mean, I tried pretty much everything, and it's a miracle that I'm alive, and I thank my daughter for that. But yeah, so I was pretty stoked going to see Idiot Flesh, and there they are performing my.
That would feel good. Yeah.
I wrote the music too. I didn't write the lyrics. Yeah. Well, they were my favorite band at the time. It's like for a while, Primus was my favorite band. Probably when I was like 17. And then I got kind of tired of Primus because it was the same.
Oh, yeah.
Even though what they were doing was incredible, especially the drumming. Oh, my God, the drumming was unbelievable. When they made Suck on This, that record Suck on This? It's a live recording from the Berkeley Square that my friend Matt recorded with an 8-track reel-to-reel behind the stage. And me and Paul, the drummer of Psychefunkapus, were up there. We were there for that recording, and you can hear us, when they do Larry, you're a bastard, Larry, you're a bastard, you can hear us. Because me and Paul were right up in the front. And right before that show, Herb sat down with us and showed us how he played the drum pattern on The Toys Are Winding Down.
Yeah, the double bass.
And that was just so fun because double kick was kind of a new thing, the double pedal.
So how did funk become like part of your diet, or at what point did it? Prior to playing in the band, I mean, you always, because I know like some of it throws back to, or was it Parliament and...
Well, for me, like disco was a thing, and I laugh now when I look back at history of the late 70s, early 80s, because, the whole disco sucks movement was kind of like some of the first evidence I got that rock and roll in and of itself is kind of racist, because everybody's like burning their disco records. Oh, we're getting into real rock and roll, and they're listening to Ted Nugent and shit. And I'm like, okay, I like all this different stuff. I loved all the rock and all that, I even liked some Western stuff back then, but I just started realizing, there's this whole cultural kind of tribal element to some of this stuff that's a little bit, it's a little scary, you see people's reaction to stuff.
You can only be this kind of a music fan.
Well, no, it's like, it's interesting to know why people like stuff, but it's also interesting to know why they don't like stuff. And like, if all these people being free and easy and getting down in the gay dance club freaks you out, then maybe you have a few issues that you might need to attend to, Thing about funk is that at this point in my life, I make a living playing funk guitar, basically. Like, sure, I have to be able to do a bunch of other stuff in the cover band I play in, but the fact that I'm a pretty solid funk rhythm player figures heavily into what I do every weekend. And it comes from Nile Rodgers, pretty much. Like, there are a lot of different funk guitar players that were good, but I think that my style of doing that is pretty much my best ripoff of Nile because of Rapper's Delight.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Because when I was 10, Rapper's Delight took over the world.
Yep.
I was 10 or 11, and me and all my friends knew all the lyrics to that, just like all you guys did.
Well, I mean, and the thing that kind of blows my mind is just that I've always been fascinated with California bands and those coast bands being a Midwesterner because like funk and reggae is just not part of our diet where we are at all.
Right.
Well, do you think it's because the people that play it just aren't there?
A lot of that.
Yeah, I think that is a big part of it. I mean, or the radio stations aren't there. Nothing is there to play. If you're going to be in a band here, it's, you're playing rock and roll, or you're playing metal, or you're playing, what I mean?
Ska started making its way into the scene.
A little bit, like in college towns, like Springfield, Columbia, Missouri, ska started coming in a little bit. And that came in with punk. But like reggae and funk,
not a lot.
I don't know.
I guess that's interesting.
And it sucks, because that's where we had to get our funk music, was from the Bay Area. It was from California. It was from, other places on the coast.
To be honest, it's like if you want funk, I wouldn't listen to us do it. It's like like blues. It's like everybody thinks that blues has to do with a bunch of guys in Britain.
Right.
Totally missing the point, Right. But I mean, that's how I got into it, and it's almost like a cultural gateway drug. It's like I was playing funk before I really got interested in listening to it more, and I was lucky that I played with Paul and Adam because the two of them had this commonality where they listened to Parliament and Funkadelic.
Right. Yeah.
And so we named our band after something from
the Funkapus,
from in the days of the Funkapus.
In the days of the Funkapus, yeah.
And I got to play with George, you know. I really lucked out.
Sorry, but like when I was like 13, 14, I guess I got exposed at that right time to like white bands playing funk, you know, essentially. And then it allowed me to look into like the Parliament Funk.
You got the Wild Cherry scene going on.
Right. Bootsy Collins and just going down.
I saw Bootsy play in San Jose in 1990 and all the guys from Digital Underground were there. He had Michael. Yeah, he had a bunch. He had Maceo and Fred Wesley playing horns, and it was such a killer show. And then the guys from Digital Underground were there, which I didn't know at the time that there were two twin brothers. And so they would take turns playing Humpty because Humpty Dance was such a big hit. Like
I still didn't
like that was our welcome back. Like it was so funny. Our welcome back to the Bay Area after our first tour in 1990 was to drive, from the north after having played some gigs in Oregon. We're driving back into the Bay Area and we're looking at the coast and we're going, oh my God, it's so beautiful here. We're so lucky to live here.
Yeah.
And then Humpty Dance comes on the radio and they're like, this tune's blowing up the charts and this band is from Oakland, California. And we're like, what? Fuck yeah. It's like Digital Underground. We were so stoked because we knew some of those guys. Well, funny thing is the only person we knew in Digital Underground was Tupac.
Yeah.
And he wasn't really officially a member of that band. He was more a dancer with him at the time when we knew him. He hadn't started rapping when I met him. And he lived in Marin for a while because he lived in Marin City, which is where Paul, our drummer, is from. And they knew one another. And so Tupac came out and watched a couple of our rehearsals. He was very quiet.
Yeah.
Very quiet.
Wow.
But I ended up having an epic conversation with him in 1992 that I'll never forget. Because Paul, our drummer, hooked us back up. He was like, hey, remember that really quiet kid that came and saw us rehearse? I said, yeah. And he goes, well, he's really come into his own as a person. I said, oh, really? And he goes, yeah, you and him talk about all the same shit. I want you guys to get together and talk. So we sat there in the parking lot outside Paul's place, which, resembled a prison block because it was a manufactured ghetto,
Right.
I mean, I didn't even know there was a ghetto in Marin County growing up until I met Paul Johnson.
Wow. Yeah.
They keep it a secret over there, I mean,
now they hide them everywhere.
Well, yeah, my dad, it was HUD housing. Yeah. My dad worked for HUD. So I said, Dad, what's the deal with Marin City? He said, oh, it was built for the shipbuilders.
Right.
It's shipbuilders housing that was temporary. And then it became this kind of lower income area that's never been considered a real town. They have sheriffs there instead of actual cops. And it's like, I kept getting pulled over every time I dropped off Paul after rehearsal because they'd see a white guy and they'd be like, well, obviously he's here to buy drugs. That's the only reason
but not heroin.
Comes here.
Yeah, that's good.
Once again, jumping around. But
do you need to wrap it up, man? It's getting close to the time you were saying. I don't want to.
I think the conversation's been brilliant. I'd love hearing all these stories, and that's what we're kind of all about, is telling stories.
Well, I know I mainly just touched on stuff. Yeah. One of the things I started saying was about Fungamungo and how, because you mentioned Mordred and then you mentioned Fungamungo. Yeah. They have a band called Mofu.
Oh, cool.
That's a combination of guys from both of those bands.
Oh, really? Cool.
It's the ones that all still live here in the Bay Area. And so Mike, that brilliant.
Yeah, we'll check that out.
That guitar player is just brilliant, man. He's so good. I use the gauge of strings I use because of Mike, and he taught me how to get quickly up a pentatonic scale. Cool. Like he's just such an amazing dude, and he's so full of positive energy. It's amazing. Like I love those guys, man. But yeah, Mofu, Phantom Power did a gig with Mofu.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And all the Phantom Power stuff's out there, and all the stuff I did with Extraordinary Astronauts and Bluebeard and the solo album I put out in 2014, it's all out there. It's on the internet. We'll do another one.
All right. Yeah, cool.
Great guy. I had a great conversation, man.